Hi and welcome to another Motion Mile After Effects tutorial. I'm MAKC Criswell, and today we've got a great design, something that walks the line between the classic, vintage, cinematic, really light leaks, grain, 35mm artifacts all over the place, and the slick, clean, modern design. Take a look. So it's pretty simple here. We've got 3 different titles here that we kind of animate on and do some fun stuff with. Of course, these titles can be customized. We've got them all in separate compositions. And then we have some light leaks, kind of acting as transitions at the end and the beginning of the design and in the middle. And then if we take a look around here on the actual frame itself, we've got some artifacts from all over the place. We've got some bits of glass here, some nice 35mm artifacting. And if you look really closely in the background here, we've got this kind of clean grid design where it's a grid and just kind of fading into the background just to offset some of the more natural elements with something a little more artificial, a little cleaner, nicer. So there's quite a bit of stuff going on here. But anyways, let's just go ahead and jump right into this. A few things to mention real quick. This is a pretty short design. It's about 5 seconds long. Normally, motion designs are a little longer, depending on what you're using it for. So you can definitely make this as long as you want. Space it out. Add as many titles as you want. This one is super flexible. And one more note, I actually did originally design this in 4K, so all of the assets that come with it were gathered with that in mind. And we're going to be designing in this tutorial in 1080p, just because that will work better, and hopefully I won't crash my machine with the screen recorder going. But if you're someone who likes to crunch numbers and look and see exactly what number I dial in while I'm doing the tutorial, keep in mind that's going to change quite a bit based on the resolution you are using. So if you want to be able to put in specific numbers, make sure you set up your composition exactly this way. So we'll name this composition tutorial. Actually, that part obviously doesn't have to be the same. And we're going to do 1920 by 1080. Now, we do actually want to be in 60 frames a second, and I'll tell you the reason why real quick. Okay, so let's hop back to this composition real quick. And like I said, this is trying to walk the line between the vintage design that people seem to like a lot, but the very modern and clean design. And so one of the things you'll notice is even in the parts of this design where there's a lot of things going on, a lot of movement, one thing you won't see is a whole lot of motion blur. Now, if we were designing at 24, 30, or 25 frames a second, you'd see a lot more of that, and that's more indicative of film. And that's just part of walking the line between these designs. Is since we're sticking at 60 frames a second, we're not getting a ton of motion blur, and so it looks cleaner. So, of course, if you're wanting a little more of a cinematic feel for your design, you're not getting it, you might try dropping the frame rate to something like 24, ideally. But that's about it. But that's really about all the prep we need. Let's go ahead and just get into this. So here's our new comp, and we'll just fit it in there. Okay, and so to start off, we'll create a new solid. And we want to have the background layer here because we're going to be overlaying a lot of different effects. And if we come up here and hit enter, we can name this to background. But like I was saying, we want to have this background layer because we're going to be overlaying a lot of effects onto this and using a whole lot of transfer modes. So you want to make sure you have something behind the design to make sure that that everything's being caught and nothing's bleeding through, and you really want a solid, just to make sure that everything is overlaid correctly. So this is just kind of a good practice. But now let's get started. So let's create some text here. And so we'll just type out whatever we want. Now the font that I'm using is, that is not my font. Now the font that I'm using is one called Lato. You can Google this, and I believe you can download it relatively cheaply or even free. Or if you're part of Creative Cloud, of course, that is actually it's actually available as part of Typekit. So feel free to pick it up. You should be able to get this font. But let's go ahead and just get our first title set up. We'll do a cinematic vintage. I think I spelled vintage wrong. Okay, and then let's bring this down a little bit. As you can see, this is an example of where resolution matters. The text was much smaller in the 4K comp, but bringing it over here, it seems much larger. So let's. Okay, looks good. Okay, and then I'll bring this vintage title up a little closer. All right, and then let's just change the weight of this these layers. So we'll do hairline, and then we'll do thin. All right, looks nice, and this is going to get us quite a bit of. This is just going to keep the text pretty similar, but also give it some contrast between the two different titles. And if we bring up the title action, we can just make sure we're centering it up pretty closely. It doesn't really need to be exact, but you can of course do that if you want. If you are interested in making it exact, there is actually an align window. There it is. My bad. And you can make sure you get that all centered up correctly. So now that we have this lined up, we'll go ahead and do layer, pre-compose, and we'll just call this title 1. And I am pre-composing all of the titles here. This is something I've done in the past, and I think I've mentioned in tutorials on Motion Model 4. But the idea of doing that is that if you're reusing a design, or if, say, you've made a typing error, a spelling error, and you need to come back and correct it, it's much easier to go to have a composition, an entire composition act as a text layer, because then you can come in and make specific changes, and those will update throughout your project. So one example of why we might want to do this is I'm actually going to put an ampersand here in the middle. If you notice in the original, there was kind of this cool look here where we have the titles contrasting each other and then joined together by this ampersand. I thought that looked really cool, but this isn't something you would normally be able to do with a text layer. So this is just one advantage of pre-composing titles. And so let's go ahead and we can just make a copy of this layer. So if we do Command C, V, we get a copy, and we'll put that ampersand there. Okay. All right, and then let's just get it the right size that we like. That'll be fine. And we might even make it a little bolder. Probably won't. We'll leave it at hairline. Whoop. I'll just make it hairline. Okay. And if we bring up that align window again, it'd probably be best just to center it. Okay. And actually, these titles aren't exactly centered, so I'm going to move it up a little bit so that it'll be centered between our two titles, not centered in the project. So, all right, that looks more like it. And then really quickly, just to kind of add the right look, what I'll do is just draw a quick mask around the ampersand. Okay, and then if we hit M, we can just change the mode of this mask to subtract, and then I'll make sure none of that comes up. And actually what we can do here is, if we come in here with the mask, I don't believe I did this on the original, but we can actually just draw another quick mask and add back in a bit of that T, which, yeah, no, that's a nice look. Okay. Oops. So this is doing a weird thing to this M. So let's see if we can't try and fix that. Okay, we'll just have it not cut off with the M. All right, so that looks good. And okay, so we got this first title all set up now, and we can just close it up and come back to our composition. And we'll just go ahead and create our other two titles. There are three. So let's see, we'll do we'll shut this one off. We'll do another new text layer here, and I'll do modern. This is a nice title, and I'm just gonna maybe add some tracking here, maybe 500 or something. A nice look. Maybe make it a little smaller, and we'll align it again. Okay, and then we can go ahead and pre-compose that, layer pre-compose, and of course title 2 is what we'll call this one. Okay, then we can shut that one off, and then we'll do modern vintage. Okay, and put that tracking back down around 250, and we'll take one of these words and change the weight from hairline to thin, again adding a bit of that contrast, and we'll align it again, and then move it up just a little bit. Okay, crap. And then if we copy and paste again. I'm using the shortcuts, but if you're not a shortcut person, you can always do edit, copy, and then edit paste to copy and paste another layer. So keep that in mind. And then what we'll do with this one is if we hit P, we can bring up the position. And of course, to get to that without the shortcut, you can just hit this arrow here, and you'll get a full list of transform controls. But we'll stick to the P, and then if we just move this down, we get a title below it, and let's see. Let's call this motion design, and we'll want to make this a little smaller and change it to light. Give it a nice look, and then let's see. Bring that up a little bit, and then I'm just going to set it off a little bit. We'll have it kind of off-centered. Okay, so looks good. We've got our, this should be our third title. Title 3. And now we've got our titles all set up. A couple of things we want to do. First, I'll grab this glass layer, and what I want to do is I want to change the blending mode to add. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll do transform here and fit to comp width. Okay, and I want to lower the opacity a lot. We just want a little bit of glass, maybe 15%, maybe even lower than that, depending on what you end up liking. And okay, so that'll add some artifacts at the top, but I'll probably want them to cut off by the bottom. So I'll just add a little mask here, and if we hit this arrow, or you can just hit F, we can get the mask feathering, and we'll feather it out a bit. Okay, so that looks good, and that's blending nicely in there. And if you want more or less of the bottom to be cut off, you can just move mask. Okay, so that looks good. And then we'll just add, we have another layer here that kind of the film scratches. And this is going to look really nice. Let's just see, I'll put it up here in the corner. The size that you want this to be will end up depending very greatly on the resolution. So let's see. And so maybe a little bigger. Okay, and then what we'll do with this one is we'll also change the blending mode to add, and we'll lower the opacity to 30-ish or so. Okay, that doesn't look bad. And then what I want to do is I want to draw a mask around this. As you can see, it's going to cut off. And so we like this kind of green blur up here and the artifacting and a lot of the scratches. So we don't want to get rid of that, but we do want to cut this off. So we can draw a pretty sloppy mask and still get a decent effect out of this. So let's feather that out. Okay, and we'll actually scale this up a little bit. So if we hit S, we can scale it up a bit more. And let's see. Maybe we'll lower the opacity a little bit more, maybe 25-ish. Okay. All right, that looks nice. And one more thing we'll do just to kind of add some organic type of feel is we'll actually, if we hold down Alt and click on the stopwatch here, what we can do is put a little expression in here. What we can type here is wiggle, and we'll do 30% every 1 second. Whoop, gotta get those parentheses right. And then if we hit enter here, close out, what it'll do is add a little bit of a flickering effect to this. So just give it kind of a moving feel, make it feel like it's a little more alive than it maybe is or isn't. Okay. All right, so now I think we're ready to go ahead and start animating some of our titles. Okay, so looks good. I guess we can go ahead and grab these film burns here. What this video actually is, what this movie file is actually, are just some film burns is what they're calling them. These are created from any number of issues or mishaps while filming on 35mm. And they look really cool. So what we want to do is try to find some cool bits of this and use them as transitions basically into our designs. So we can actually open it up by just double clicking and kind of watch some of these if we want. And if we kind of flip through this, we can find some of the transitions that we like. Okay. All right, awesome. Okay, so once we find a one of those burn effects that we like a lot, what we'll do is just find it in the composition. Okay. All right, so we'll pick this one at the very end here. And we'll want just under, maybe a second here of this. And then if we hit Command-Shift-D, what we can do is split it, and we'll grab this bit here. And we don't want too long of an opening transition. Like I said, this is 5 seconds, so we don't have a ton of time to work with. Okay, but all right, that looks good. Okay, so what we've got is we got our film burn in at about the 1 second mark. It's good to go. And then with this one that we've picked, we have just kind of some lingering light leaks that are going on. So that'll give us a nice look. And this particular video clip Depending on the resolution, there's two things you can do here. This is we're working in 1080p comp. This is 720p footage. So what we can probably do, since this is a film burn, it's already looking kind of vintage, nasty, and that's kind of the whole idea. What we can do is actually just transform, fit to comp, and then change the blending mode to overlay, and it will actually look pretty good. And then change the blending mode to add, and it'll look pretty good. Okay, but if you're working on something higher than 1080p, 2K, 4K, 6K, 8K, beyond, what you'll definitely want to do is come to the effects and presets and look up and find the detail preserving upscale effect and drag that on here and try to get the best quality upscale you can. Might even go into a third-party app and try and figure something out. Okay, so we have kind of our opening transition in, and so then what we'll do is we'll make a copy of it, and we'll do, let's see, transform, time reverse. Well, there should be we'll right-click, and do time and time reverse layer, and then just drag it into the end. So while this was animating us in, it'll then of course animate out. All right, looks nice. Okay, and so now we can go ahead and start to animate our titles. We have, let's see, this is at the 41 frame mark. Okay, so we'll have right at about a little under 4 seconds for all of our titles to show up. And so we'll go to about the halfway point, and we want our third title, the main kind of title, to stay on for the longest. So we'll just hit Command-Shift-D here and split the title there. So it'll start at about this point. And if we go down to Title 2, we want Title 2 to, of course, end when Title 3 starts. Whoops, my bad. So we'll do, we'll split it here. Again, that's Command-Shift-D. And then, let's see, we'll come to about this point, and we'll want it to change from Title 2 to Title 3. So, Command-Shift-D, split, and split that. Okay. And then we'll split this title at the beginning. Let's see. And then we'll split it at the end. We'll actually have this last title kind of fade out as the transition is going out. So the light leak will actually just kind of cover it up and bring that down. And then we can split it there. So if we take a very rough look at our titles, we can kind of see how we have it timed. Well, if we turn them all on, we can see we start with the first title, cut to the second, and then the third. So let's actually start to animate this in. If you notice in the original, of course, we had these cool lines that came up and almost acted as and animated in the both of the first titles. So what we want to do is go ahead and try to recreate that. So what we'll do is we'll need a new solid. So we'll do layer, new solid. Of course, Command Y if you're into shortcuts. Okay, and we'll call this line. There is actually a little bit of a pecking order for how we want these all of these effects to be layered. So if we hit the tilde key, it's right above the tab, we can open this up. We can make this section full screen. Oh, my bad. And so what we want is we want for the light leak effects to stay kind of on top of everything, because they're going to be overlaid on top of everything. Then we want our background and our textures to stay on the bottom, and then of course the lines and the titles to just stay in the middle. But just try to keep that in mind while you're setting up your composition. There won't be terrible effects if you don't do this, but this is just generally how you'll want this to stick. So again, the tilde key right above the tab, and okay. So now what we'll do with this line is we'll grab a mask effect, and if we click right in the middle here, and then we hit Command and Alt, we can draw a line right here. All right, so we've got one line, and then I'll go ahead and just copy and paste this. And okay. So, all right. All right, looks good. Okay, so here, basically there's two things that needs to happen here. We need the line to animate itself in, and then we need it to reveal our title. So we'll actually set it up to reveal the title first. So if we start it right about here, this is where we can get it to start to reveal the title. So we'll just click on both of our line layers, hit P, and hold down position. And if we come forward just a little bit, let's see, maybe 8 frames or something. And then we just move the positions of these lines a little above and a little below the title. That will look pretty good. And I did mention motion blur. So if you want some motion blur, you can of course just click on these layers and then click this motion blur icon here, and then make sure you have it turned on for the comp, and you'll get a little bit of motion blur. But it actually does look pretty clean and neat to just have no motion blur at all. So keep that in mind, but ultimately, of course, it's up to you. And so we have our line animating in our text, and so now we have the movement of the line. And okay, so we have the movement to animate in the text, and then what we'll do is we'll again click on these and hit S to bring up the scale. And if we unlock these, what we can do is have them both scaled down to 0. So make sure these are unlocked. Hit the keyframe button here on both of these. Go back a few frames. Let's see, we're at 52 right now, so we'll go back to maybe, we do some math, 46, 47-ish, and we'll just change the first 100% to 0. So now if we take a look, the line animates itself in and then brings up the text. And okay, looks awesome. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and grab our first title here and have it align itself. So we'll come to the frame. If we bring up the preview window, we can skip frame by frame, and we want to come to the exact frame when it's done. And what we'll do is draw a mask right at where the lines are. Okay, and then if we hit the mask path button, we want to keyframe that, and then we want to come to the frame where it first starts. Okay, so there we go. And then what we want to do is kind of zoom in here. Just kind of have it at that point. And we'll get a little bit of residue left over from this mask where little pieces of the letters are showing up. So what we'll do is we'll actually just split this title one more time right here. Command-Shift-D and delete this bit before. And what should happen with that mask is it should pretty closely stick with the animation. You can see here a little bit, it looks like the M is kind of getting away from it a little bit. So what we can do is just click in here and change this for each keyframe. But overall, it should do a pretty good job, and it definitely does. Okay, so go ahead and fit this to the project window again. Take a quick look, and what we have is all right. Looks nice. We have the line kind of animating in, and sick. And all right, that's pretty dope. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to move from the first title to the second title, and we want to again use the line to do that animation. So what we'll do is, let's see, here is the frame where our second title comes in. So we'll go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14 frames. And then go forward 7. Okay, and what we'll do with these lines is we want to bring up the rotate, and then if we hold on shift, we can hit S and P as well, and we can bring up the scale and the position like we had before. And what we want to do is hit this stopwatch button to keyframe the rotation, and then we also just want to keyframe the scale and the position, because it'll start to look kind of weird what's going on. Okay, so then we'll go forward 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frames. And what we'll do is we'll have both of these lines rotate basically 90 degrees. And because of the way that we set them up, they'll actually come together and make a perfect line. Okay, and so then what we want to do is we also want to keyframe the scale to 0, again like we did before. And we'll actually set both of these to like 2 real quick, because we're going to have to change the position. And so we need to be able to see where we're putting it. So we'll do the title action safe. And actually, if we come here and hit the position, and then just click align, and if we come back up to the align panel, we should be able to center it, and that'll do the trick. So then if we look at what's happening with our lines, they're basically going to be scaling down as they animate in. Okay, so that's basically what we want to happen. And then what we'll actually do is let's zoom in here a little bit. Golly, it's just such a tiny space to work in. So then what we'll do is we'll actually have the rotation. We'll move these keyframes back a little bit, and then move these up a bit, and we'll have the rotation take place before it scales down. All right, so let's take a look at that. And what should happen now is we have our rotation, and then it scales down. Okay, so that'll actually probably look nicer. Okay, and then we want to, of course, animate our title to go out with this rotation of the lines. So we'll come back to title 1, hit that, bring up that mask again. And okay, and we'll set a keyframe, and then we'll come to the end of the rotation, and what we want to do is basically rotate it 90 degrees, and that'll stick with the rotation. But then what we'll do is just also bring in the mask. Okay, so again, we'll just check to make sure that it's keeping up. Okay, so for example here, it's not really, so we'll have to re-keyframe a little bit of this. The rotation is a lot harder to keep up on, so you'll probably actually want to go frame by frame and just make sure that it's all good and make some adjustments. You'll have blank spaces all over the place. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. All right. Okay, and then we can cut off. We can split again. Again, we're doing Command-Shift-D to do that. Turn off our title safe and have it shrink. Okay, and then just to animate in our next title, what we'll do is we'll come forward. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7. Now we'll do 5 frames, and what we want to do is animate back on these lines. So we'll scale them up again. So let's see, about yay big. We again just kind of want them to cover the title and then a little bit over, so it looks like that'll be 15 or 16. Okay, so it looks good. And then if we go ahead and hit Shift P, we can bring up the position. And we'll first go ahead and keyframe the positions, and then we'll go forward a few frames. And then we'll go ahead and just animate out these lines to go to their position. Okay, and we'll basically want to do the same thing with the mask that we did to the first title. Okay, so let's go to title 2, and we'll create a mask right here. Okay. And then we'll keyframe the path, of course. Go back to where this started. And animate the mask in. And then we'll go ahead and split it there as well. Command-Shift-D, of course. And we're just splitting it to make sure that there's no overlapping of any of the titles, in case you were wondering why I've been splitting it so much. And then we'll just go frame by frame and make sure that it's doing well. And yeah, perfect. Okay, so now we have our first 2 animations set up, and this is actually all we have to deal with the lines. That's by far the most pesky kind of part of the tutorial. It just takes a lot of animation, and of course most of it is by hand, so very pesky, but totally worth it. Looks amazing. And now if we play the this section, and now if we take a quick look through this, we can kind of see what we've created. Ooh, yeah. And heck yeah, now we've got our, and now everything is good to go. And okay, I'll actually find the frame real quick where our title 2 is going to end. Okay, all right, so it's right there, and then I'll cut off the lines. Command-Shift-D to get rid of those. Yeah, good to go. And okay, so now everything's all set up. And in between, to go from title 2 to title 3, what we actually had was an animation here with some of the film burns. So let's do that, of course. So if we bring up this film burn again, we can kind of flip through them and try to find one that we like. There's one here in the middle. Okay, so once we find what we were looking for, we can actually set an in and out point here, and then just import that little bit of what we need. Okay, so here is our the animation that we want to use, and we'll go ahead and just again we'll do transform fit to comp and change the my bad. It's this one down here. Transform, fit to comp, and make sure that we change the blending mode to add again. And okay, so we'll maybe speed this up a little bit. It's a really nice transition, but it happens a little slow. So we'll do time and time stretch, and let's see, we'll do about 70 or so, so that should make it a little faster. Might even want faster than that, so time stretch and maybe 50. Okay, so now we'll have a really nice quick transition, and what we'll do is we line this up. We can zoom in here and line it up on the exact frame so that the frame when we transfer from title 2 to 3 will be white. And then what we'll do is make a copy of that. Command CV, drag this over. And then right click on this, on the track we just copied, and do time and time reverse layer. And so we'll have it animate in and then subsequently out. Okay, and so since this is kind of covering up our design, going completely to white, we'll actually have a really nice transition where everything kind of fades in. And now everything is all animated up. We've got our cinematic elements in, our transitions in, and so there's just one last little piece of this design, and that is of course the grid. And we'll throw that on just to give it make things pop a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll need a new layer. So I'll do a new solid. We'll want this to be just a pure black solid, and there's an effect, let's see, called grid. And so I'll grab that on, throw it on here, and then I'll immediately pre-compose, move all attributes, and I'll call this grid. And I'm going to move this below the titles, below the transitions, but right above the elements, the film scratches in the glass. Okay, so let's hop into this grid here and do some editing. Okay, so if we grab the corner point, what we can do is kind of make this more of a square grid. And then we can change the border size to something really nice and thin. And then if I'll actually make a copy of this, and I'll set the track mat of the grid to the other grid. And then if we come in here and move around with the positions, we can kind of get some interesting looks. And we'll turn up maybe the border here. And we can get some really interesting kind of weird techie designs just by playing around with this. What do you call it? The corner controls almost act as like a random seed or brainstorm operation. And so we'll just get kind of a weird looking grid that we like a lot. Okay, so that'll do the trick, and then what we'll do is we'll come back over to our tutorial where we put this grid, and we'll go ahead and make the grid a 3D object. This will be the only 3D object in the scene. We'll bring up the rotation controls, and then we'll just rotate this on a few of the different axes. Let's see what happened there. Look, maybe scale it up a little bit. Okay, and then what we'll do is with these rotations, we'll just do we'll alt click on the stopwatch, and we'll do time star maybe 2 or something. And what we'll get is just a little bit of movement over the comp. We might even do just 1. And so we'll get just the very slightest amount of movement. And that'll just kind of add a little bit of rotation over the comp. And then what we'll do is we'll just really bring down the opacity of this grid just a little bit. to about 20%. We might even actually make a second copy of the grid, maybe move it in a different way in Z space or something, and just lower it down a little bit more. And you can play around with that, kind of stagger those effects and do some cool stuff with it. Okay, so it looks nice. Again, we'll just kind of run through it real quick. Let's see, shut off the masks here. And so we have our line animate in, and animate in our first two titles, and then we have a nice kind of flash of film leaks to animate in our second. Introduced and ushered out with some more light leaks, and all the while we've got this cool grid kind of moving in the background. Overall, really great design. There's a lot going on. Hope you're gonna like it a lot. You can probably slap this thing on anything; it'll look great. If you like this tutorial, check out plenty more motion graphics tutorials at motionmile.com. But I'm Mackenzie Criswell, and I'll see you next time.